second speaker is Dr. Temitope Shubamu. Dr. Shubamu is an environmental toxicologist with a research focus on the risk assessment and management of organic pollutants in various environmental media using classic and emerging ecotoxicology tools. This is with a view to develop and provide targeted environmental management advice to regulators, policymakers, as well as innovative products for the treatment of wastewaters. Dr. Shubamu is an ardent researcher with several peer-reviewed journal publications and grants, which includes 2014 awardee of the Laureate UNESCO for Women in Science in Sub-Saharan Africa. She's an affiliate of the African Academy of Science, among other professional societies. She's an advocate of the UN SDGs 6, 11, 13, and 14, and African Union Agenda 2063 Goal 7, which is science and risk, communication, evidence of policy, and researcher visibility for social impact. Dr. Shubamu holds a PhD in environmental toxicology and pollution management, and she lectures at the University of Lagos and leads the evidence used in environmental policy making in Nigeria project. Our third speaker is Dr. Bethel Uzoma Ihuba. Dr. Ihuba is a senior research fellow and acting head of the Legal Research Division, Department of Legislative Support Services, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, National Assembly, Abuja. He's an expert in public law and international business law and has authored several scholarly work, including textbooks and in national and international peer-reviewed journals in these areas. He has presented at several national and international conferences, including at the African Union Commission, Addis Ababa, at its December 2019 International Law Conference on Constitutional Democracy and Rule of Law. He teaches legal research methods, constitutional law, and international business law as the author of the seminal work on legal research, Introduction to Legal Research Method and Legal Writing. Okay, thank you. Now I'll now briefly talk about the modality for the webinar. So basically, we're going to invite the speakers to talk for 7 minutes. After which there will be, for each speaker, there will be a follow-up questions. Then they will open the questions to everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, I will invite Dr. Temitope Olomola to make his first presentation.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Mr. Moderator. Welcome, everybody. My brief discussion this afternoon will be on ethical conduct in research. Research, of course, is very important, and it is the building block of a whole lot of things that happen in society. And the fact is that in the last about 30 to 40 years, there has been more interest in what researchers do, not just the research results that we produce, but actually the way we conduct the research itself. And so based on that, there is more need for we researchers to actually work to ensure that there is transparency in what we do, and that we actually can get the trust of both the public and the funders that help us in doing research. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has amplified this point a whole lot more, with society and the public depending really on the products of our research. Research conduct is very important. How do we conduct research? Research must be conducted responsibly. If you look at the conduct of responsible conduct of research, there are two sides to it. One is what we call research ethics, which really has to do with how we engage with the research participants, the environment, humans or animals, And basically it looks at it from the perspective of morality. The other side of responsible research, conduct of research, is research integrity. And that has to do with professional conduct of research. Okay, it looks at it from a professional side, and this is one area where generally there is less progress. More has been done on research ethics. Most of our universities or research institutes have research ethics committees, okay, that help to manage ethical approval and those kind of things. But research integrity, on the other hand, is the one that is lagging behind, and that has been more of the area where focus has been generated lately. There are these four fundamental principles of research integrity, as attested to at the Second World Conference on Research Integrity that held in Singapore. And that is honesty. There has to be honesty in research, accountability, professional courtesy and fairness, and good stewardship. The fact is, these things give the background upon which we expect that every researcher is then able to work with integrity. Research integrity and research ethics actually are together, just like an umbrella. Ethics might form the handle, but the integrity is they are still connected. And to show that this is important also to us in Africa, the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa policy document for the continent actually emphasizes that we do need to build governance structures to promote ethics and research integrity. And this is important so that we can increase the trust of public in research. Looking at the entire research ecosystem, there are two ends to it, as it were: the research conduct end and research misconduct. So in between, you have what we call questionable research practice. So it's either we as researchers choose to be on the responsible conduct side, or we begin to drift gradually towards the research misconduct side. And so it is important that we are aware of what exists. And research integrity majorly separates responsible conduct of research from what gradually tilts towards misconduct. Under responsible conduct of research, we have integrity being a very critical factor, acknowledgement of the roles of others, which of course means that those that don't have any role are not acknowledged and don't exist. Responsible communication and good stewardship, because obviously we are using public funds. Also, human, animal, and environmental respect is involved. Like I said, that deals with ethics, and the first 4 points there deal more with integrity. Under questionable research practice, you have issues like ignorance, laziness, peer pressure, competitive pressure, a reward system, which is good on the one hand, but for instance, in a country like South Africa, where they now have a reward system that started about a decade and a half ago, you suddenly realize that the research output has increased significantly. Now, the question is that good research? Is it not good research? Is it research that is with integrity? Those are questions that we need to just begin to think around. And then fame and conflict of interest. And then what is, or the areas that we can classify as research misconduct? Of course, plagiarism, falsification of data, okay, that is twinkling and tampering with data obtained to fit the desired kind of result. Fabrication of data, no data exists, but something is created. Duplication or fragmentation of work, otherwise known as salami slicing. Unethical authorship, whether gift or guest authorship, as it were, or what is called ghost authorship, where somebody actually is an author but is not listed. And then you have copyright infringement. So the two highlighted in red are areas where the other speakers will be emphasizing on in the course of this presentation. One of the major indicators that we have that we use now to track research misconduct is retraction, okay? And while retraction may not necessarily mean misconduct, it appears to still be major indicator, and it's still what we still use to observe what is going on. Of course, the areas reflected in a retraction or the reasons for retraction may go from anything from misconduct to questionable research practice, or it will actually be sincere mistakes or errors in computation. This chart just shows us what was obtained by a team that did a study here in Africa over about 4 years, just looking at the reasons for retraction from Africa. And you see that plagiarism is dominant there, followed by duplication. I'll just begin to wrap it up by suggesting some areas that I think are things that can be done to help. Of course, establishment of national and institutional research offices is key. There have to be, we need to have research offices that are looking into this matter and discussing it, raising awareness as urgently as possible. We need to raise awareness and understanding of researchers, because it's not automatic. Unfortunately, academics is one area where you join and everybody assumes you know what to do. People honestly at times do not know what to do, so they are sincerely ignorant. Of course, there could be laziness there, but as soon as we begin to put in some form of courses that people can go to orientation, the stakes will be a lot better for us. Then developing preventive and remedial tools for both students and researchers. We need to ensure that disciplinary measures are put in place by the research integrity offices. If there's no law, then there's no sin. There must be some ways of actually grinding on these matters. Mentoring of senior academics or senior researchers helping the younger ones. Inclusion of research integrity in the academic curriculum, and then of course signing and adopting some of the international statements that have been made on the issue of research integrity. On this slide, I'm just showing the website of the World Conference on Research Integrity, which is a global meeting now that addresses the issue of research integrity. It happens every 2 years. Coincidentally, the meeting for next year has had to be shifted to 2022 because of the current pandemic. However, I'm just highlighting 2 of the statements or heavy ones that have come out from those meetings in the last decade. That's the Singapore statement that I mentioned earlier and the Hong Kong principles. I'll encourage all of us to please visit that website. As a matter of fact, you can actually endorse the Hong Kong principle as an individual, apart from your institution also endorsing it. This paper came out in Nature just a few weeks back, and it basically takes the context of research integrity, talks about 9 ways of moving from talk to walk. And again, I would encourage us to some of the things that are spelled out here, because the truth is we need to, as researchers, move from just conducting research to realizing that we now have people who are researching the researchers. And it means that we cannot just do business as usual. We have to focus on actually conducting research properly. So a few references there. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lomala, for that very informative discourse. You really mentioned some very key, important facts, and I really want to ask you some specific questions. First, you mentioned the issue of data falsification. So what strategies do you think can be adopted by African academics to mitigate the issue of data falsification among some very few academicians?
Thank you very much, moderator. Falsification, of course, is a big problem. And I think it leans heavily on the understanding of researchers that honesty is key as far as research is concerned. We shouldn't be trying to predict the result of what we are doing, even from the start. It is important that we do the research properly, we see what the results are, and then we can then begin to explain what we have seen. So first, on the one hand, I think it is a honesty issue. And honesty is not something that people automatically are aware of. There needs to be orientation by the universities, by the employers, by the research institutes, so that academics are clear of the necessity for them to actually be honest in what they are doing. Reproducibility, of course, is a major issue. We need to have results that are reproducible. So if you have done something once, or a student has brought the result and all of that, then it can be tried again. I mean, because you see, most of the time, falsification of data comes from changes that are made to what the original result was saying. So it is important for the supervisor, the researcher, to also look at the raw data. You cannot just assume that the student has done it perfectly. So it's important we look at the raw data, we get involved in the process, at least try to see things from time to time. We should also, if possible, have a shared reporting system, so that, for instance, if the results are coming for some particular analysis, if it can go to the supervisor, the co-supervisor, in such a person exists, so that everybody sees the raw data. So the student realizes that he doesn't actually have the option of going to change any part of it because everybody has the raw data. I also think that it's important that our journals are able to do the needful, and especially our African journals. We need to be able to have proper ways of checking. The whole thing of reviewing must be done with a bit more care. At times, a result can look spurious or look a little bit out of the ordinary. Then the reviewer should have the opportunity of calling to see some of the original results that made them come to such conclusions. I think those are important things that can help us within our system.
All right, thank you very much. And I really agree with you that students do falsify, especially undergraduate students do falsify data. In such a situation, especially in our universities where we might not have time to follow every student, sometimes we have so many undergraduate students. What else? Because you mentioned being part of the process, but if you cannot be part of the process to ensure that the student gets good data, what else do you think could be done, to really get us to ensure the data that students are giving us out of their research?
Okay. Well, the truth is, supervision is a lot of work, and whether here or elsewhere, it takes a lot of time to actually supervise a student properly. First, the supervisor or the researcher must realize that there is room that there can be falsification of data. Okay, and realizing that makes him or her more careful in accepting results that are being presented. So you must realize that, I mean, the thinking process, even of the students, I mean, now with millennials, you have people who, I don't want to make it a blanket statement, but you have who generally feel like information out there does not necessarily belong to anybody. I mean, people who grew up with the World Wide Web, accessing information looks like, well, it's there, you can access it, and really you can just use anything you want. So at times they may get to points where they don't realize that, well, you cannot just tamper with information from a source. If a particular experiment has been done and you are getting so result, and it is different from what exists, that may in fact be the high point of your own work. So it is important for the researcher to let the students realize that we don't have an end in mind, as it were. We are trying to see what we get from the particular study we are doing, and the hope is that we can explain what we are seeing. It may not fit what has been seen elsewhere. It may not even fit what has been seen in a similar environment close by. But this is what we are seeing in this particular environment, and that is what helps our community and the public to end up trusting what we are doing. We can't just we must let students realize, we must let our mentees realize that we do not have a result that we expect. We are trying to interrogate a matter, and hopefully we should be able to explain what we get. Obviously, it means that the researcher too must create time to be part of the process. You can't just be seeing everything at the end. Once we only see everything at the end, then there's a problem, because things would have been tampered with before it gets to us. Those are my thoughts on the matter.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Olomola. We'll still get back to you with some further questions. May I invite Dr. Temitope Shobamu to make her own presentation?
Thank you. Dr. Olomola, if you could please stop sharing so I can share my screen.
Yes, done.
Okay, should be able to share now. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be joining this meeting from all over the world. This afternoon, I'll be speaking basically on plagiarism, how to mitigate this particular unethical conduct in academics. And I'm going to try as much as possible to do justice to this topic within the next 7 minutes. And I just want to put forth a disclaimer first, that my views in these presentations are personal, and they're not necessarily representative of my institution's views on the issue of plagiarism. As Dr. Olomola, presented in his paper, research misconduct can vary, and it can be from fabrication of results and data, falsification, plagiarism itself, and reporting research results that are actually not correct or they have been falsified. And so when we talk about plagiarism, you're talking about either you're copying somebody's work, using somebody's work, and just to say that this can actually be accidental, and that's the cases most of the time with students and perhaps even some colleagues, and I'll get to the reasons why this is so. And the essence of that is that you are deceiving a third party, usually the assessor or a journal or an editor, saying that what you have copied or used from another person's work is your own and not that of the author. Why? Because you did not credit or reference the original author. And that's why when we look at the causes of plagiarism from systematic review of literature on this topic, a lot of the time it starts with institutional failure. And Dr. Olomola said things about that. When the institutions don't have structures in place, plagiarism is not part of what you learn. Usually, particularly in Africa, is not part of curriculum for courses. And, training, even institutional facilities and structures like plagiarism tools are most of the time not available. And so a lot of people are really not aware. We also have issues with individual attitude, and it really boils down to integrity. Are you someone who has and shows integrity, whether the person is a student or a researcher? Awareness is very important. Lack completely or poor writing skills. This is another and I'm sorry to say that this is also one of the things that is peculiar most of the time, and with African researchers. We usually don't write a lot. It's not something that we're really accustomed to. And of course, writing goes hand in hand with reading. Improper time management. A student needs to submit the dissertation by next week, and the student has not started writing at all until a few days to submission. I lecture at the University of Lagos, and for the past 6 years that I've been lecturing, this has been a continual issue. Most of the time, even if that submission deadline is extended, you have the same problem. So you want to perform magic and write a 50 pages or 100 pages thesis in 1 week. There is no way that plagiarism will not come in. So how do I know if I've plagiarized? Of course, there are different names, forms, and types of plagiarism. And some of these are actually shown here. We can have what we call identity theft. And that's you steal, you copy, you purchase another person's entire document. In fact, I got wind of this recently, that students actually purchase whole theses and dissertations for some sources. And they are able to circumvent the system so much so that the external examiner, the supervisor doesn't realize that that thesis does not belong to the students. It's that bad. And you can see in terms of security, it's insane. And it goes all the way down the line. Copying, you're actually copying large portions, either paragraphs or sections of an entire work without giving credit or citing the person. Cherry picking a few terms, not copying but phrases, again without citing or giving credit. That is terrible. Duplicating or reusing another person's work for another purpose or for publication without citing that person. And that person could include you. You published a work in 2018, you use the similar methods for the work you want to publish in 2019, and you copy whole sections of the method section without citing your 2018 work. I've seen that a lot in some papers I've reviewed. Paraphrasing. Did you cite the source that does not exist? This is something that we're not so used to, but it is a form of plagiarism. Sometimes you tell a student, you cannot give a categorically or factual statement without putting a reference there. And then because the student cannot come up with a reference because they just got it from off the internet, they just put there anybody's name. And then you go and check the reference list, you cannot find that paper. That is plagiarism. Misinterpreting or citing a source out of context is also plagiarism. And how serious is that? It's serious. And if you don't mean to plagiarize or you were not familiar with it, the fact is that you are still accountable. That's what makes it what, and that's why like they say, there is no ignorance in law. It does not matter whether the student had gotten a course or the student had been tutored by the supervisor or even the academic, has gone through the process of learning or researching, about training in plagiarism. The fact is, if you get involved in any of this, you are actually held accountable. That's how serious it is. So how do I know if I have plagiarized? There's so many sections there. Are you confident that the ideas you have put forward are your own? And where you have used the ideas of others in your own words, did you cite them? Did you give credit to all original authors? And where you quote directly, did you put them in inverted commas? The ideas that you summarize, did you completely change the wording or you use it word for word? Are you confident that you did not distort or misinterpret the original author's meaning when writing that paper or dissertation? Are you confident that the organization and style of your work is in your own creation or you have copied another person's style? Did you use proper and recognized citation method? I mean, these are some questions that we should really ask ourselves. So when you want to be sure if you did not plagiarize, look at it in concept, in style, in structure, in diction, and in everything else. Are you sure that your work is original? So what are the several softwares that we can use? Because like I said, plagiarism can be intentional or unintentional. And the truth is, most of the time it is unintentional. I mean, I think it's nonsensical for someone to go through the process of actually conducting a research, writing up the data, and at the end of the day, what you want to do is just to copy someone's information and put your data. So most of the time it's actually unintentional. And that is why we must take responsibility and be accountable to ourselves as academics, as students. And we must make use of softwares that are out there. The technology is there. Some of these softwares are not free, and most of the time they're used by institutions and journals like Authenticate, Turnitin. And we have a lot of free ones. Of course, the free ones have their own limitations. Most of the time, you cannot upload a whole document, but you can still use these free ones if your institution doesn't have access to these paid versions. However, you must be very careful, because I have had a situation where my student, a master's student, did so much work. And because the student knows that I will turn that paper into Turnitin and check for plagiarism, she decided to have it checked by another colleague who is in another school abroad. Unfortunately, the colleague, did not click do not store in repository. For those of us who are familiar with Turnitin, you have to, click those options. Until tomorrow, if we put in a thesis, the original paper she submitted into there, it gives us 100% plagiarism. And so in that instance, it's not that the student had plagiarized, it's just that, the software that the student had used, basically put it forward like, is in the repository of that institution. So we have to be careful whichever tools that we use. And there are a lot of courses and certification tests that can be done nowadays just to help recognize plagiarism and to avoid plagiarism, whether as a student or as an academic. I took one by the Indiana University in Bloomington in 2015, and I recommend this to my students. In fact, it's compulsory. You have to take this course in the course of your work with me. And it's quite rigorous, but you can finish within a day if you are determined. And you get a certificate, to show that you have read through, you've gone through the course, the tutorials, and you take some tests and exams to actually be able to recognize plagiarized text, and you get a certificate. There are also resources. For example, in plagiarism.org, they have a lot of resources on how to identify and avoid plagiarism. I want to give an example, and this is a very sad situation. It happened in September. I'm an ardent researcher on ResearchGate, and one of the researchers I followed, I just saw in his thread, Edmond Sangoyado, and this came up. This paper was published in 2020, September, and I've blinded the author here because I know a lot of us will start searching for it. And this author said, this is a ripoff of our paper. His own paper is titled Sources, Behavior, and Environmental and Human Health Risks of High Technology Rare Earth. Essentially, what this author had done apparently is to change the title and use a lot of the text in this original paper. And then the all co-authors of the original paper began to raise alarm and say, this is very bad, this is unacceptable, this is academic malpractice. And then they got information about the particular journal and decided to contact. I guess in the process of contacting, the author now began to, the person became, anxious and sent a personal email apparently to these authors and told them to check. Ladies and gentlemen, I was really curious. I was literally embarrassed for this person, and I decided to check up on the author. I realized that the author in question is a PhD candidate. I am almost sure, ladies and gentlemen, that he or she did not intend. I am almost sure, I don't know. Did not intend to copy, but perhaps the person doesn't know. The person didn't understand because the paper is a review paper. A PhD candidate. As at this morning, when I checked on ResearchGate for this author, that account has been deleted. Either deleted by the researcher or deleted by ResearchGate, because those original authors raised a lot of uproar on ResearchGate about that matter. And I must say, and that's why I talk about both the academic, and his students have to be accountable, because not only is this student, potentially academic career a bit distorted, even the supervisor and those captured in that paper at the moment would have issues. Not only has that account been deleted, that paper is also no longer found on ResearchGate, meaning it has been retracted or again brought down by ResearchGate or by the authors. So I want to conclude on this note. We have to be intentional. There is no gainsaying about it. We must be intentional about mitigating this unethical conduct, amongst others. We must take responsibility for our own actions. Talk about the issue of data falsification. It's not easy. Most of the time as a supervisor, sometimes you supervise 10 students, 5 students, 8 students, particularly in our climate here in Nigeria, on an annual basis. Most of the time it's not easy to, be there every point in time, but there are ways to go around it. And I'm sure for those of us who are more experienced, it gets better with time and over the years to actually be able to, you can actually look at the data or its thesis and you can see that this data is falsified. because if I get the raw data and I do the analysis myself, I can tell the students this data is not true. And that's how you can get them. Institutions have to invest. There is no way about it. Although these things are expensive, particularly for public universities. I remember when I attended the NYA plagiarism workshop in 2018. At the time, my institution was not subscribed or their license, was not paid. I had to contact the tutor at Covenant University to help me with, plagiarism check until I was able to get my institution to subscribe. Plagiarism policies not only should be developed, because I'm sure a lot of institutions have this, but it should be advocated widely and sensitization very strong. Plagiarism courses and tests should become mandatory. I'm not sure I've seen that across any Nigerian institution, but like for the examples I've shown, a lot of these developed countries institutions have it as part of courses that the students must take and pass before they complete their program. Continuous orientation is important. So what NYA is doing is fantastic. And to the best of my knowledge, NYA does this thing on plagiarism every year. Okay, libraries will play a significant role in this, and the Office of Research Integrity of Institutions. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention, and I can take questions now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shobamu, for that very interesting expose on plagiarism. I have a couple of questions for you. I'm sure the listeners also do have questions for you. But I think we'll go to Dr. Bethel Zoma to take his presentation, then after I'll come back to you. Dr. Bethel?
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm trying to share my. It's supposed to be on video, isn't it? Okay. Okay. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I start now, please?
You're on, yes.
All right, thank you very much. This is Betty Azomayamba. I'll be talking on copyright breaches and plagiarism, mitigating two unethical conducts in academics. But I will be very much emphasis on the copyright aspect of it. My presentation is going to go this way. Why plagiarism? Why copyright? Copyright and plagiarism, a separate presentation of the two. Then I'll give you a case study that will explain or gives how these things might happen and the reasons for it and how it can be resolved. Okay. All right. First, there are ethical guidelines and institutional requirements for assurances of integrity of research and to ensure that the creative output are rewarded. That is the essence of plagiarism and the copyright rules. They generally ensure, apart from this, some other issues. One, there's need to ensure authenticity of work, legitimacy of work, validity of the findings and recommendations, its usefulness, profitability, like if you're going to get patents and copyright from it. It also encourages creativity. Also, it also ensures attributability and accountability. Accountability, let me emphasize on that, because when you conduct research, it's not just about your findings, and also the implication of your findings. If your research is going to lead to mass murder, it's going to lead to courage steps, it's going to encourage on ethical conduct in society. We need to know who made that research. So there's a sense, one of the sense of having the full identity. Next page, please. Hello, you are controlling that. Okay, thank you. Plagiarism and copyright. Yeah, plagiarism, as the previous speakers have already said, is when, of course, when you use someone else's words, ideas, or without giving credit to the original author. And as the last speaker spoke about, you can also plagiarize yourself. If you publish an idea before and you repeat it without acknowledging the work from where you got that idea or the first place presented, it is plagiarism. However, this is a bit different from copyright, even though plagiarism can also happen within copyright, but it's a bit different. Copyright is an infringement. It occurs when you exploit or appropriate somebody else's intellectual property rights without the person's consent and approval. The consent approval could be oral, it could be written. It's usually must be written when you are given exclusive rights to use a particular work. But if it's non-exclusive, meaning another person can use it, the oral mission is all right. But it's better to avoid litigation later to let there be evidence. So this occurs when you produce somebody else's work, you distribute copies of somebody else's work, you create a derivative work from somebody else's work, you display somebody else's work publicly without the person's formal permission or approval, or you do any other act that demonstrate that you exploited somebody else's work for your own benefit without the person's permission. That is a copyright. It also applies to folklore. When you use stories of your grandfather tells you or your grandmother tells you, but it's been known and you don't use it that properly acknowledging it, this can also be copyright. I think it's the NCC that has the right to give you a license to use those folklores. Let's page, please. Now, look. Next, please. Sorry, you are controlling my slide. Can you please? Okay, I'll have understand. Now, how do you govern? How do we govern plagiarism and copyright? Plagiarism is usually governed by institutions, bodies, academic and ethical codes. So, and there are sanctions against when you breach it. However, a lot of copyright is governed by law. Each country has its own law. In some countries, they have the federal law and the regional laws. In Nigeria, we have just one law, and that is the Copyright Act, which Cap 28 Laws of Regulation of Nigeria 2004. It governs how you exploit copyright and when you can exploit it and who can exploit it and who can give him the right to use of copyright. When there are sanctions, possible sanctions when there's a breach of copyright, this could be a criminal sanction, there could be civil sanctions. On enforcement of copyright, like I said, it is in enforcement of copyright and plagiarism. In Nigeria and the other institutions, other countries, plagiarism is usually enforced by instructors. They are the first line of duty, the first police of plagiarism that will go. Your instructors, your supervisors, are the first people to enforce plagiarism. Ensure that the student doesn't plagiarize another person's work. But as a researcher yourself, you should also be your first enforcer. The institutions usually have their own ethics and codes and guidelines on how to ensure that there's integrity of the work done, that it did not plagiarize somebody else's work, and if plagiarized, they actually acknowledge it. Even if he copied or got an idea from somebody, they actually acknowledge the work. The publishers also have encouraged to
some of these
enforce.
Like
Hello? Hello?
Why they should do this thing?
Am I on? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Also, academic sponsors and colleges and institutions, they also like the NYAs, they have their own rule against plagiarism. Please, can somebody is speaking as well? Can he turn off his video, please? Hello? Obina.
Problems. But let me go to.
I'm 100% support. Question will be okay.
You can continue, please. Okay, while we're waiting for Dr. Iwa to connect back, let me go back to you, Dr. Olomala. You know, there's this syndrome that I'm sure we have all experienced of, I beg, put my name syndrome. You know, put my name in the paper.
No, it's not a paper. In the course of my training program, I did some individual training program on LinkedIn with some colleagues and students. So I used it. Studied, I developed. It's not real, just from recipe. Give an example, like if an associate professor, for instance, is aiming to become a full chair, and the requirement is need to get a certain level of publication. Now, in trying to do that, he also has a case that he needs to resolve. He has been approached by somebody that he needs to get information on how to maybe how he can enforce a fundamental right. So two issues are there. He's fighting to get his full share, and he wants approaches a junior colleague to conduct the research. He started with the professor, the professor copies everything from part of his work and presents it. Now there's mention it's not data from the hello.
Okay, Dr. Huber, I think your connection is.
When you
Dr. Huber, can you hear me? I think your connection is bad, so we'll get back to you, okay? All right, so we'll get back to you. So we want to ask Dr. Lomola. I was asking the put my name syndrome that is very common. How does that syndrome affect academicians in particular and the university system in general? Please, can you throw more light on?
Thank you, sir. I think laziness is a problem. Okay, and the fact that a person wants to be listed as an author in a document where he or she doesn't have any contribution is a serious flaw, because as academics, one of the things that we should be clear about is that the job requires that we build a name. And so there are many researchers that many of us know by name that we have never met before, because we build a name over time, and that name, okay, is what we all struggle and strive to protect. So why would a person who understands that he's supposed to be building a name in a particular area or niche of research, and that name should become a force to reckon with, want his name to suddenly be put on any other document? That shows fundamentally that there is a problem. Like I said earlier, academics oftentimes are not given any form of orientation when we get on the job. So you get in and it's assumed that you must join the race and start running. You don't even know the rules of the run of this particular type of race. There's a different way you run a marathon from how you run a 100-meter dash. Okay, but oftentimes lack of information and orientation affects colleagues, such that you now see people that just want their name, even if the paper is in a different area of research completely, you just see names, on so many publications, and you're asking yourself at the end of the day, where is this person's area of focus? Where is this person's area of, where we should actually know that, okay, this person is building a niche for himself. Okay, so I think it is important that, mentorship, okay, could help very significantly in this area, but also that even our employers actually get to. I think the noise is coming from his end.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Okay. So yes, that would be my. But of course, the issue is that it still lays back to the issue of honesty. It's all about honesty at the end of the day. That is the fundamental principle on which it now rests. Okay. And so academics must learn to be honest people. And I think the rule of whistleblowing should also be encouraged so that people are exposed where those cases exist.
Thank you very much. Before we go back to Dr. Huber to finish his presentation, may I ask Dr. Shobamu, what do you think is the long-term consequences of plagiarism to the Nigerian academic system? Dr. Shobam?
So what that does to us really is that it doesn't put a lot of trust, or if any at all, in the quality of research that we do. And if that is the case, then that's really a serious problem, because research is supposed to impact society and to, contribute into decision-making by government. Imagine if a medical doctor or someone in the medical sciences publishes a paper with data that is falsified. We've seen this a lot, particularly in developed countries. And then this has formed a basis on which doctors practicing in the field are recommending drugs or treatments to patients. You can literally kill people, if you are involved in plagiarism and data falsification. So this is how terrible it can be. We've heard of cases of where senior researchers commit suicide, because of things like this. So it's not only a Nigerian thing. It cuts across the world. The bottom line is, for we as individuals, as researchers, academics, we must be intentional about showing integrity in all that we do.
So, okay, so you mentioned Turnitin, for example. I know that in my institution, Nigerian University, I've been trying to buy Turnitin, but it's pretty expensive. It runs into some dollars per year for each particular student or admission. So do you have any, can you give us any free online plagiarism tool that you know? Is there anyone you can recommend?
Yes. So I shared that, although because of time, I could not go through each of them, because for each of them, they have limitations, they have their own pros and cons. But let me start off from the point of the Turnitin. Yes, it's really expensive. And one of the things I've considered is we researchers must begin to consider putting this as part of our funding in our research proposals to procure these softwares. And I believe that some very large grants can accommodate this, because we need it. In terms of, and then we can also look at colleagues, particular colleagues, maybe in developed clients who are collaborators, can help us. Like I gave you an instance of at the time when my institution did not have, some colleagues at the Covenant University who had it were able to help me. But of course, it became a problem when I had a lot of papers to check, and then I'm really eating to their time. So there are some free ones, but they have limitations. A lot of time you cannot upload full documents and all that, but there are a lot of free ones out there. If you just Google them, you'll be able to use them for free.
All right, thank you very much. I will still get back to you with some questions before we open up the questions to the listeners. Now, can we get back to Dr. Hiwa, if your connection is okay?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Finish up your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
You.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was talking about the enforcement of copyright. Copyright is actually enforced by two bodies. One is the NCC for criminal sanctions, but civil sanctions is enforced by the owner, the corporate owner, or the unauthorized agent, licensee, or the entrepreneur who is now taking the economic benefit of the copyright. The under criminal sanctions, sections 18, 20, 22, and 27 of the Copyright Act provide sanctions. When you copy somebody else's work, when you sell somebody else's work, when you distribute somebody's copied work, there are sanctions for it. When you perform somebody's responsibility for performing acts, there are sanctions. The civil and criminal sanctions can run at the same time. But the fact that you have a civil case going on doesn't stop you from being charged criminal liable for breach of copyrights. These sanctions could range from 12 months to 5 years, and therefore, in terms of imprisonment. But for financial sanctions, fines, it will be fines of from 100 naira per copy for whatever you have infringed to 1,000 naira per copy for what you have made. 100 naira is usually for distribution, merely distributing a copyrighted work. But for 1,000 naira is like when you actually made a copy. For civil sanction, the owner of the work can also enforce, gather back everything that you have used, with the machine you used to copy, the template you used to copy, the documents which you reproduce or items you produce, the owner of the copyright takes ownership of it. Now, I gave you a little case study of what may happen, where what is actually one of the reasons why academies fall into this trap of plagiarism and copyright breaches, because we want to be fast, we want to the syndrome, what they call it, publish or perish. With the story I just gave you, things that arise from the issues that came up from the issues of conflict of interest, the issues that affected the quality of analysis, issue of contemporary relevance of the data used. Because the data used could have, for instance, if it's a case law, maybe by the time the case law was reached, there was a position of the law, but subsequently there have been new case laws, there have been an amendment in the law, but you used it to skew the judgment to a wrong angle. So the data is no longer relevant. I also talked about the actions, the IP I gave you, the supervised update, will amount to copyright breaches, because he took a whole work of another scholar and put it as part of his work and present it as his own. He didn't, or the person is not a co-author, the person is not referenced at all. It's a serious breach. It's both a copyright breach and plagiarism. The issues of referencing. There's also the issue of attribution of authorship. And attribution of authorship is very, very important. It's beyond the idea of let's know who authored or who did the work. Also, let's know who to hold accountable. Because when you push on some ideas that may be inimical to society or maybe of relevance to society, we need to be able to know who we can trace the reasons for an actions back to. And when you use data that are not yours and you didn't develop it, you didn't explain how the data came about, there's a likelihood of going to you having false findings and conclusions. And based on the false findings and conclusions, actions may be taken. Policies may, for instance, if you are advising the National Assembly, for instance, you're advising the legislature, advising the executive, they can, based on that, carry out policies that are wrong, that are flawed. So this is a very serious issue. Tomi has given an example of doctors. These are serious as it can be. You can be based on your research finding, based on your recommendations, laws will be put in place that will end up creating problems for the society than solving it. Now, how do we avoid it? For plagiarism, we can avoid it by you first read and understand what you are reading. Don't be too fast. Read and understand. When you understand it first, then if you must quote the work, use quotation marks. Better summarize or paraphrase the material, restate it in your own words. But most importantly, credit the source. Let us know that it is not your idea. Because if you are, you be called upon to defend it, it's not your idea. But when you credit the source correctly, then most importantly, another aspect again that is very, very important, which Jimmy has actually mentioned earlier before, is that there's necessity for you. You also need to, it's better to take a training in research methodology or ethics of research. For copyright, if you must use a copyrighted work, please work within the statutory exceptions, like fair use, special for academies. Section 5 gives out that license. Because as far as the work is what you are copying is for academic purposes, it's not for commercial use. You have that leeway. Also, purchase a license if it's necessary. Individuals, people can grant you a license. And if you are granted a license, respect the terms of the existing license and the conditions in that license. It's possible they give you exclusive license, it's possible they give you non-exclusive license. Whichever one you are giving, respect it. Then request permission from the owner or the entrepreneur. The fact that you requested permission, you may not even need to pay it. You just request and they can give you permission by a letter. So you have evidence to prove. Conclusion. Now, obeying ethical guidelines is as important as conducting the research. We don't really realize this, but it's very, very important. When you obey the ethical guidelines, you obey the integrity guidelines, obey the plagiarism guidelines, you obey copyright guidelines, they are as important, as ethical as the research itself which you have conducted. Because it's a process. It affects eventually the output of your work. Then when you deliberately neglect or breach ethical guidelines, it impacts negatively both on the research output and you as a scholar. Whether you're a student or you're a researcher, you're a lecturer, or you're just a researcher for an institution. And to avoid criminal sanctions or civil suits, loss of respect, including loss of a certificate, need to be ethical. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ihuba, for the presentation. I have some specific questions for you.
Yes, sir.
I would like to know if someone's work was reproduced without permission, what can he or she do to redress it?
Okay, thank you very much. It depends if it's a copyrighted work. If it's just plagiarized work, the example that Temitope gave us is one of the first things to do. You write the person who plagiarized the work. Gentleman, lady, it appears the work you are publishing as yours is actually my work. Give the person the opportunity, let the person know if it was accidentally done, the person will hopefully retract it and say, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to plagiarize you. Or it's not plagiarism, it's my work, it's my idea. Because it's possible that while you are researching on the idea, the person is also researching on the same idea. Possibly you presented your work before his or hers. The person cannot present their own data. The person has the opportunity to now defend his work. Now, these are the data informing my conclusion. So the first is to inform the person. The same thing with copyright. Inform the person. This work, whatever what you have just done is my work. Please, can you withdraw or pay me homages for it? If the person is unable to show that it's not given to show that it's his work and is not remorseful, didn't ask for permission, and it's copyrighted material, take the person to court. You report to the NCC and take up a legal action. So the NCC could be chasing the person from a criminal angle, or chasing the person or an institution from a civil angle. You're entitled to damages for it. Thank you very much.
All right. So can every work be protected by copyright, or are there some specifications?
Yes. Yes, I got your question. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yeah, not really every work. What gives you right ownership to a work, copyright for a work, or even plagiarized work is that it has to be an amount of effort put in the work, and there should be a level of originality in the work. There is really no measurement per se, but you have to demonstrate that there's originality in your work better than what other person. Not that it has not been done before, but there have been an improvement in what was done before. You have to demonstrate that before the SEC can formally register it. However, you don't actually need to register it, but it gives you that sort of right. And if it's first in time, yeah. But as a Nigerian, for copyright, you have to be a Nigerian, or you be resident in Nigeria. If you're an institution or organization, you have to be registered organization in Nigeria. Though we have what they call reciprocal agreement with some countries. So if those countries are giving our citizens the same right entitlement in their country, even though they are not resident in the country, we can also extend the same right to those countries, the citizens of those countries in Nigeria. So somebody in Ghana, his work will be protected here in Nigeria because we have a reciprocal agreement and there's a bilateral agreement on copyright. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I have a work which I want to register in Nigeria, how do I go about registering it, and how long does the protection last?
It depends on the type of, if it's a literary work, it lasts for the whole of the writer's life and 70 years after. For other works, it lasts for just 50 years from the day of production of that work. So I think the one that has the longest lifespan is literary work. At the time the work was done, during the duration of the life of the author, and 70 years after, others are 50 years. Then for registration, you can actually do, the truth is that you don't need to register copyright. Once the work is done, you are entitled to copyright. Once it's published, the law requires the publisher, the printer, to register the names and the names of the authors of a work with the NCC, or to have a register themselves. To have a register with themselves, so it becomes evidence which you can use against anybody, any person that breaches anytime. However, for purposes of if you want to have a formal evidence, you can register with the NCC. So NCC has a platform for that. You can register online. I think the NCERS also, you can register online. You can also register fiscally by going to the nearest NCC office in your state and present your documentation. So I think it takes about 30 days or thereabouts for them to get back to you. But you don't really need it, but it can be, it's available. Thank you. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah. Sorry, it's like we missed Dr. Obina.
I suspect that.
Yeah, I think it's not available. I think I can move on before he eventually comes back.
Okay.
I think the next question will would like to ask is to Dr. Omolola. Sir.
Yes, sir.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah. The other question, I think the next question that he's supposed to ask you is the issue of reward system, and that what are the rewards of research integrity to both the individuals and the institutions? What are the rewards? What rewards do research integrity brings to individuals as well as the institution where they work? Thank you.
Okay, well, I believe that no doubt your work, and especially when you're doing quality, proper work, it would naturally attract peers. So you would have peers that either want to collaborate, or you can be invited to maybe even write reviews on particular subjects on the one hand. So yes, as long as you have been consistent in your area, your peers are your first judges, okay? But of course, it goes beyond that. It also goes to the fact that the government, for instance, would require people in a particular area, perhaps in policy formulation, in channeling the future. Those are things that would naturally require that they consult people who are experts in that area and who have been found to be consistent and who show integrity. So yes, the rewards may not be something that you can say, oh, because I'm doing this, I will get that. It may not come that kind of direct way, but the truth of the matter is that if we want to have more funding for research in general, then we need to begin to do the research properly. Our funders are watching, just like our institutions are watching, and ultimately, of course, the government, of course, also is watching. And then, so if you want to apply for funding, the fact that you have done some works in the past properly, and they can see that your general research track is showing a lot of integrity, funding bodies at times could even invite you directly, to apply for certain grants. And I think these are some of the kind of advantages it has. It may not be something that, oh, because you have done your work well, you automatically be doubly promoted or anything like that. No, but I think the rewards may be in some ways indirect until they become direct. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. And also thank you for that technology failure. All right. So I would like to know how will the government and other stakeholders in educational system promote research integrity? How do you think it can be promoted?
Well, I think one major thing, like I indicated in the recommendation, was we need to have research integrity officers. We are not going to promote anything when there is no law that says that A, B, C is wrong or is right. Okay, so first and foremost, at the national level, we need to have a research integrity office. At institutional levels and in our organizations, we need to have bodies that monitor research integrity. And then they can, clearly bring out policies, and those policies can then be used in handling cases. So we expect the government, the funders, the employers to have these research integrity offices set up and manned by capable experts, such that when there are reasons or things that maybe kind of look like they are not clear, such cases can be referred to such offices, and they can conduct whether investigation or just run through the process and be sure of what is right and perhaps what is being misconstrued. But I think one major level is, because government will not by itself bring up a policy on research integrity as it is now. They would need to set up a separate office to handle that, and then that can end up helping each individual, each researcher to value the place of research integrity.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Olomola. Please, I want to remind the audience, if you have any question, you can put it in the question and answer chat so that I can pass it to the presenters. Dr. Shobamu, I want to come back to you. Can you please shed more light on this concept of self-plagiarism and how it can be avoided? Dr. Shobamu.
Yes, thank you for your question. Somebody actually asked that question in the chat, and I think I provided an answer. Okay, just to say that self-plagiarism is published it, and then you're about to publish another work which is similar. And then because of laziness, quote and unquote, like Dr. Lomola said, you basically copy the methods, for instance, or part of that work, sometimes in its entirety, a whole session, a whole paragraph, and you put it in the new documents. Then you are plagiarizing yourself. And a lot of we academics say, well, it's my work. I did it. It's the same method and all of that, but you don't have to put it. It's English. You don't have to put it in the same way. You can write it in another way and cite that particular paper where you have used the same idea or the same method. What we're saying is you don't do copy and paste because it's your own work. That's self-plagiarism. So that's my take on it. We have to show originality in each paper, in each work, in each article that we do, even if the work is similar to the work that you yourself have done before.
All right. Thank you very much. So what do you think the recent proliferation of preprint databases about these preprint databases? Would they have any effect on plagiarism? What do you think? As in before you publish, to put it on your presentation.
Yes, for me, the preprint databases, for me, I think it has perhaps maybe more ill effect than good. I know most of the time what it does is that it wants to make the research, available so that it can be used even ahead of potential publication. But that's the point. It's assumed that that work will essentially be published in the same context with little or no corrections. And that's where the issue of data and using it is important, because a lot of time, particularly in these current COVID times, a lot of articles that have been published even cites articles that are in preprint databases. And articles in preprint databases means that they have not gone through peer review. So, and I've seen recently a lot of papers that are published, archived even on ResearchGate in these preprint databases that are rejected. They don't get published because either there's issue with data or the research is not properly conducted or something. Meanwhile, these papers are being cited. The preprint itself perhaps almost has 10 citations. So you can imagine, I gave the example of the issue of medicine because that really comes to life with a lot of us because we are dealing with human life. For instance, you have papers in preprints that are put forward there on COVID, and you are giving recommendations based on those preprints. And people are assuming, because this has been put forward by an academic, that this is correct, particularly people who are not in academics or in the field, who cannot decipher the technical details of those things. And they use the results of that to make recommendations or to take action. That becomes a big problem. So that's why, for me, I know that preprint databases have its own good, like I said, but we must be careful as researchers. For me, if the paper at least, if it's at the point where it has not gone through any review at all, it should not be uploaded yet. Even if you are sure you've done the research well. Because somebody will cite that, and then the person is citing something that is not published at all. How many papers are you going to retract or are you going to remove? So that becomes a real problem. That's my own take about the issue of preprint database. There's a strong proliferation, particularly among young people.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Showamu. I think I'll go to the question and answer chat to read out some things people are talking about and some questions. So Clement Ogunkunle thinks that to call for falsification by students, supervisors can request for raw data from students during the course of experimentation. So when students understand that, they will be restrained from data falsification. I think that's a great idea. Caleb Adelowo says that copyright does not protect. All right, that I'll get back to you. That copyright does not protect idea, but expression of that idea. Dozie Ike thinks that we need to collaborate on Turnitin and Authenticate to make anti-plagiarism software affordable to individual researchers and institutions. I really agree with that. We need to share resources because not every institution might be able to afford that. So Donald Umuna wants to share some things with us. I don't know whether he can be allowed to talk. Okay, I'll go back to Dr. Shobomu. Sorry, there is also Chris Akinroye wants Dr. Olomala to assist to display the websites and links of free plagiarism slide that was earlier presented during the course of her presentation. It should be Dr. Shobamu.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, okay, it would be great if you can do that. And Dr. Shobamu, I will come back with the last question I have. So it's observed that some works are no longer protected by copyright and are considered to be in the public domain. So can you throw more light on the concept?
Hello.
This question should be for Dr. Iruba. When some works are considered in public domain. So can you throw more light on that? Can we use it freely?
Like I said earlier, copyright
Dr. Iruba,
yes, thank you very much. Copyright has a time limit. It's not in perpetuity, especially for purposes of use. But it doesn't stop you from the owner of the copyright can still benefit from its perpetuity. So once they become in public domain for anybody to use freely, like literary work, if after the death of the owner and 70 years afterwards, it's free use for everybody. And if it's government owned to 50 years after, it's free for every use. You cannot do whatever you want with it. That's the only time. But as far as the copyright subsists, the owner of the copyright is still alive and is still within 70 years. You cannot use. However, Section 5 of the Copyright Act gives off right of fair use. But I don't know whether if that what the person is referring to public domain. You can make use of those works. But for those for academic purposes, for teaching, for learning, the Section 5 lists the circumstances in which you can make this kind of use. But it doesn't stop. You still have to acknowledge it. The fact that you have a copyright, you can have a copyright and still commit plagiarism. So you are entitled to make use of somebody else's work. You produce maybe a whole chapter of a work in your own book. If you don't acknowledge it, it's plagiarism. Even if the person gave you approval, a license to use the work, and you don't acknowledge that it's not your work, it's plagiarism. So there are two different. I think the question is kind of conflating plagiarism and copyright. They are two different things. Yeah, and like one of the commenters made on the comment, yes, it's not the idea that is copyrighted. It has to be reproduced in a fixed form. It has to be written. It has to be in a film. It has to be an item that you can now register, or you can now trace back your copyright to. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Looking at the question and answer chat box, I think Donald Omuna, what he wants to pass across is that there are several instruments that have recently been developed to address low quality research and innovation in tertiary institutions in Nigeria and sub-Saharan African region. So I think Donald Omuna, if you can share those resources, maybe paste a link where we can go and read further, it would be wonderful. I think we are almost coming to the end of this program, the time allotted to us, but I have one more question for you, Dr. Ihuba.
Okay, sir.
I mean, you have already mentioned that, but can you tell us some of the legal punishments for plagiarism and copyright? You have mentioned that, but maybe it might be good for us to have it clearly again.
Okay, thank you very much. There is no, for plagiarism, there is no law against it. Only that institutions, organizations are entitled to have regulations. They make the regulations on how to punish plagiarism. and it could range from withdrawal of the work. If you're a student, they could fail you. They could withdraw the mark awarded to you. If you're a lecturer or a researcher, you could lose your job. You could lose your employment. You lose respect. These are the sanctions for plagiarism. However, for copyright, it's a different thing altogether. It's regulated by law. One, there are civil sanctions. So somebody can take you up on that. Somebody can sue you and claim damages for you infringing on his or her own copyright. And it includes you maybe 1,000, like I said, range from 100 naira per copy if it's just distributed. If you reproduced, 1,000 naira per copy of whatever you reproduce to whatever number of, then they can also make claims for special damages. That's for civil. But for criminal sanctions, you can get as much as 12 months imprisonment to 5 years, depending on whether you distributed or you made a new copy or you just sold. So there are criminal sanctions, and the criminal sanction it may look too short, but it's serious in an academic environment. Once you have been convicted for an offense that affects you, you may lose your job for it. If you have been involved in politics, it may destroy your life, political life. So there are very serious sanctions. I know there are movements to increase the financial sanctions because especially what happens in the piracy issues, but those are yet to be done. However, please, may I just use the opportunity to say something that Dr. Temitope Olomola mentioned about the issue of establishing research integrity in order to reduce the rate of copyright and plagiarism. Yes, it's good, but I think one of the major problems is that we seem, aside from academics and maybe those who are in sciences who have direct financial benefit of the output products, microbiologists, and they have direct benefit of whatever they eventually produce. Maybe they get patented. Now it's not beyond the research work. It's not there's a patent coming out for me to benefit. Aside from that, you go to your libraries or universities, loads of research work lying down in the library not being utilized. When we have a collaboration between government institutions and corporate organizations for those research work to be made use of, so that we should be able to encourage use. I think NIT do something like that, but not yet properly formalized. When we have an opportunity to make full use of our work, it will encourage us more, and it will also encourage individuals to fight against people plagiarizing their work. A lot of plagiarism is going on. Sometimes people just say, let me ignore him. He just wants his professorship job. But when you know that there is a financial benefit involved, and that government will also use it for policy and economy to develop, and the work is out there, it's not just in the university library, it helps to reduce this issue of plagiarism. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. There are also some couple of questions. I think Dr. Lomola, you might want to address that because someone was asking that while as an undergraduate, this issue of plagiarism was not taken serious, but as a postgraduate student now, it becomes, a monster. Everybody is, talking about it. So, can there be a training on plagiarism for students? Maybe you might want to share the initiative of NYA in this regard. Dr. Lomola.
Thank you, sir. Well, indeed, the way to go really is to continue to create sufficient awareness. And like Dr. Obina has just mentioned, the Nigerian Young Academy has been trying to do its own bit in this regard. We've been organizing anti-plagiarism workshops in different universities across the nation. Unfortunately, of course, there has been COVID this year and things have not, we haven't done a lot this year, but in general, the academy has been trying to do that. And I believe that the suggestion on having something for undergraduate students really becomes important. Ultimately, the hope is that the universities and the nation itself can go the way of having research integrity offices, and then it puts a demand on them to actually have some sort of, it could be a general course that all students have to take, just like you do all those general studies programs in the first year or thereabout. And it could be anything around those kind of issues. But the idea is that it is possible for the universities to have something developed within the curriculum to address the matter. But as an academy, the Nigerian Academy has been trying to, come in to bridge the gap in this particular area by raising awareness as much as possible. But yes, I still believe there's a lot that our institutions can do, and there's a lot that even the nation itself can do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Dr. Shobamu, there's a question from Kajetan Ugoke. He said he extracted up to 3 articles from PhD thesis and sent to 3 different journals. Why the methods are the same and result different? What do you do to avoid self-plagiarism, knowing well that the works we are carried out with the same method?
Yes, thank you very much. I actually read that and I was about to answer it, and I had mentioned it earlier on. Like we said, what you want to avoid is you want to avoid a copy and paste of the same method across the 3 journals. I beg to say that these methods that we use a lot of the times, we are not the first to, in fact, most of the time, we are not the inventors of the methods. We are also citing someone, the original author, or someone who has used that same method. And I believe that in your thesis, or ideally, you don't write it the way the person has written in his original paper. Rather, or what I mean, you don't copy and paste directly what the person has said. Of course, the basic equations and basic content will be the same. And so you must reference that original author. But the way you write it, the way you describe the methods needs to be different. That's what we're saying. Let the originality show across the 3 different papers. If you write that you did, you collected 10 mils of this, you did this, and then you write it the same way in terms of description, all the way in the same manuscript, then that is plagiarism, self-plagiarism. But when you describe it, the main content is the same, but you describe it differently, then you don't self-plagiarize yourself. And this comes with practice. There's no way, that's why we said, you read well, you write. The more you write, the more you get better at this.
All right, so can there be, Gose Prince is asking, can there be a case where one arrives at a conclusion from his or her research or makes statements as it comes to his mind without seeing it from another person's work? So Yeah,
I believe so. But most of the time, a lot of the thinking we do, and particularly for we researchers, comes a lot too from our reading. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if you read that paper 5 years ago, as you conceptualize, as you think about your own results and what it means in terms of future work or in terms of impact, there's no way that what you have read before will not come to fore. But of course, it's a mix of your own ideas. What we are saying is, you don't go to another person's paper, look at the person's conclusion that is similar to what you have gotten and copy what that person has said. Most of the time within your own research, there will be the point of contextualization. No matter how close the research will be, there will be some originality that is unique and specific to you that someone else cannot echo. And that's what we're saying.
Can I assist in that question?
Sure, please.
Okay, there's another aspect to what that question there. You see, like Dr. Shobamu said, yes, most of the ideas we have are things we read for maybe ages ago. And when you're trying to complete a research, there are tendencies there might be similarities to what you read and you bring it in. One of the ways to avoid this is this, especially in your conclusion and recommendation. Don't introduce any idea, any conclusion that is not supported by the evidence you have. Let whatever conclusion you are going to make, whatever recommendation you are going to make, be supported by the evidence in your work. If you just start drawing conclusion from that is when plagiarism is likely to come in. You bring on one beautiful recommendation, but it's not supported at all by your work. There's that likelihood that you plagiarized. There's that likelihood that there's remnants of what you read before that you're just introducing because of the similarities. That's one of the ways. When you start to make a conclusion, go back to your methodology, go back to your findings. Is your recommendation supported by your findings? If they're not supported, stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's this Folusho Agumbiade. I think his question is that there are issues around open sharing of online sites where free online copies of books can be downloaded like Z Library, and there are often copyright infringements. So what are your takes? on that?
For copyright infringement. No, if we open sharing, if the author of the work subscribes to it, it means they has given license for the work to be shared. They don't just share anybody's work. People who are really subscribed to it. And the other thing is that the sharing of that work, you may be exploiting the provision of Section 5, but they expect people to make use of academic purposes, for academic research. That is for purposes of copyright. So you will not be breaching any copyright rules as far as you stop at using it for academic work or use it within the provisions of Section 5, 1 and 2 of the CA. That is if you are working from Nigeria. However, the fact that the work is shared openly, there is open access, does not mean that you can plagiarize it on the answer of plagiarism. What plagiarism actually requires from you is not permission. What is required from you is acknowledgement. The idea, the section you quoted, acknowledge the author, reference the author, state the source. Once you have, even if the owner of the work doesn't want you to produce the idea, in fact, they cannot stop you. He or she cannot stop you from producing his idea, as far as you have acknowledged that person. That is for purpose of plagiarism. So when you now want to sell that work, when you want to bring down somebody's work and print it and sell it as work, that is copyright. You're not reproducing. It's a different thing entirely. It's a different. You now be in breach. Thank you. I hope I've answered the question.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. So I think Iwoji is asking whether the presentation slide can be shared, and I think the organizer of this workshop will do that afterwards. Donald Omuna has finally shared the site he promised to. So finally, I think the last question we have is from Oji Ernest. He says, I want to know if it's possible to have a national research database, maybe sponsored by NUC, that can amalgamate all research done in all tertiary institutions in Nigeria. This is because some students go to other schools and lift projects done long time ago and modify it for their project. Anybody could answer this?
Yeah, let me come. I think Dr. Temitope Shoba mentioned this thing in passing earlier on. One of the first people to be able to detect plagiarism are actually supervisors. When you leave your students to just write and submit, there's a likelihood that plagiarism will occur. But if you and the student are working together from day one, you discuss even the proposal, discuss the chapterization, discuss the submit one chapter, you discuss it, and there's less likelihood of plagiarism. But when you leave the person to just go and write, you just go and leave a work. A lot of people don't want things to be difficult. That's one. Second, what Dr. Temitope Olumola suggested is another way to resolve this problem, the issue of research integrity. And I added that there should be need for us to exploit our research work. We should stop it from being in the library only. Other than that, there are databases and there are still plagiarism going on. There are libraries Emerald has thousands of journals, SFA has thousands of journals, there are still plagiarism going on. But I think the internet is helping us. Authenticate, turn it in, all those things are helping us. The more you make use of leverage on that, the lesser plagiarism issues will come up. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So I think we'll end with Chigozie's Enyogasi's question. That I think that will be directed to Dr. Shobamu. He's asking, when you cite an author in the main body of the work, is it a must to include in your reference the work already cited? Is it also plagiarism? He said that there are times you are told to provide your best 15 to 20 references in the reference list. So he's asking, when you cite, must you put that in the reference list? Dr. Shobamu, I think with that we will end.
Yes, thank you very much. And I agree. I know, because a lot of times, and this usually happens where you are citing secondary or even tertiary papers. What I mean is this: most of the time, it's best to trace the original paper where that had been cited by the other researcher you want to cite. So in a case where you have a plethora of references, most of the time maybe you have just one fact, and then you now put 5 references to back up that fact. You need to go to the actual or original source of that fact or information, and which usually will be backed up by maybe a research data or something that person has done, and cite that primary source. Of course, if there's room, depending on, particularly if it's a journal, depending on how many references you are allowed to have, you can also cite the secondary author, but it's most important to cite the primary author. That's the person from which that initial idea was gotten or the initial results was obtained from. I hope I answered that question.
All right. So thank you very much. I think the speakers have done justice to the topics and the questions they were asked. So I will hand over to the president of Nigerian Young Academy to close out this webinar series. So Dr. Abiodun Ebetekun, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And I really appreciate our speakers today, Dr. Temitope Olamola, Dr. Uzoma Ikuba, and Dr. Temitope Shogbamu. The moderator, Dr. Obinna Ikunife, thank you very much. We've learned a lot from your wealth of experience. We do hope that if we have the need to call on you at any time in the future, you'll be happy to oblige us. I will hand you over to Dr. Awal Ibrahim, who coordinates the webinar series, to give you a sneak peek of what to expect in the coming month. Dr. Awal.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. President. And once again, we appreciate all the speakers for taking their time to give us a very interesting lectures. And we also thank the attendees for taking their time to be with us this afternoon. Of course, we had a very interesting webinar, very, very fantastic, and we learned a lot. Now, like you said, we look forward. The NYA webinar is actually a monthly affair, and we hope that in the next month we are going to also bring very interesting concept, especially highly likely we'll move towards economics, and we're going to call very capable speakers to come and share some experiences or give us some insights into economics of COVID-19. More specifically, we will look at that in the next webinar, and it's going to happen at the last week of next month, which is November. Now, the last announcement I want to make is the fact that please, there are so many requests for the slides from all the speakers. Please, may I request that although I've responded to most of you, but may I request that all people that are interested, all attendees that are interested in the slides, please should contact me at mawalibrahim@gmail.com, or they can also contact president@nigerianyoungacademy.org. And when you do that, I think in the next one day, when we are able to pull all the requests, we'll share the slides at once. Once again, thank you so much to the attendees. Thank you so much to the speakers. And I say thank you to all of us. God bless us all. Thank you, sirs.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
The rest of your day. We look forward to having you again next week when we'll be talking about COVID-19 and the economy. Next month, rather.
Next month.
COVID-19 and the economy. I trust that you don't want to miss that. Thank you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
But Dr. Awal, I think someone has dropped the email address, so you might need to.
Sorry?
Someone left the email address on the.
Yeah, okay. Usually, are we online? I usually simply tell them to send me the request so that we pull all of them at once, and then I will now respond to them.
Okay.
That's what I've been doing.
Permission to leave?
Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Well
Bye.
done.